Hi, Cindy. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kimberly, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So what I am going to do is I'm going to read the biography that you sent me. I think it's very interesting. So I'm going to read that, and
That's
then
my life.
I'll let you tell us a little bit more about yourself. But you
Okay.
started off your biography, your formal introduction, as you can introduce me as the greatest woman to ever live. And that thrilled me. Okay, so Cindy grew up in Dallas and you love Dallas, even for all of its warts, but you love it like you would love a family member. You hold a degree from UTD and UTA, as well as a couple from Dallas Community College. And that's where you started your criminal justice career with long-term former motor jock, Cookie Larson. During your time with Dallas Police Department, you spent half your time in patrol and half your time in traffic as the one car on a motor jock squad. Prior to the Dallas Police Department, you were in the United States Air Force and you learned to maintain and repair fighter jets.
Right.
The motor jocks reminded you of jet jockeys, so it felt like working with brothers.
Yes.
When you left DPD, you realized that you somehow had to get that adrenaline. It was going to have to be manufactured, so you bought a motorcycle. You've been married once, and you're not going to do that again because it's just not for you.
Nope.
So, having said all of that, and I think this definitely shows your personality, is there anything else you'd like to add before we get going?
Oh, for crying out loud. After the police department, I did not make my 20.
Mm-hmm.
So I left and I was still pretty young. So I ended up in nursing school and became an RN and started that at Baylor Dallas. I did all kinds of, well, not all kinds of different stuff, but I did Baylor Dallas, stayed with Baylor and went to several different locations because I went from Dallas to Garland. They closed down Baylor Garland and we all scattered to the wind. And I ended up going to Baylor Irving and doing basically the same thing I was doing at Garland. It didn't have near as much fun because it didn't have the same family atmosphere. But left there to become a hospice nurse, and then I retired from that last year.
Okay, so you continued to serve people even when you left police work. You went into nursing, and I know that you were at Baylor Dallas the fateful night of July 7th when several of our brothers were transported there when Parkland overfilled.
I wasn't working the ER.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody kept telling me I needed to go down there. And I was like, no, I don't. They're in good hands. They don't need me. But later, I went to the other side of the campus. Later, meaning a couple weeks, went to the other side of the campus, and the uniforms that they had cut off, they had on display. And I was like, you could have done a lot of things except that. And that still hit me right there. So, even though I wasn't part of it, I was part of it.
Well, as we know, it never goes away.
Now,
It never goes away.
well,
But
and I knew Michael Smith because I didn't know him personally. I don't expect him to, recognize me out and about, but I knew him because I worked out of the central station in traffic.
yeah, he was in my academy class.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah, in the academy picture, they have us in the front row looking at the camera, scared to death, right next to each other. But yeah, very nice man. Very.
There was a beautiful display with him at wrestling.
Yeah.
In Richardson. Yeah.
Very, very nice man. Some of the things that I find kind of funny is our conversations that we have had, because you hired on in 87 and I hired on in 89. Right. And that, while that doesn't make us pioneers of women in patrol, it does put us pretty close to some of those pioneers in patrol. And, we were wearing pants and we carried our gun on our hip. We didn't have to wear the skirts and carry our pistol and a revolver and a pocketbook, you know. We were allowed to work with men. We were allowed to answer calls, all that stuff that really had changed in the, 10, 20 years before that. Um, and I don't look back and think that I had it hard, but I can look back and I'm very proud of the officers, the female officers we have now that are changing things. But
Yes.
I loved patrol. I loved patrol. And you and I had both worked at North Central and
Yes,
wanted
we
to
did.
get out, wanted to get out of North Central.
Yes.
So to go back to Oak Cliff and work where we felt like we belonged. And yeah, so what is your thought on that? What is, when you think back to going back to Oak Cliff and working there, what do you think about?
I think about how many times I chased somebody down an alley versus North Central. It's like I know every alley on our beat. Of course, our beat was about this big because it was so hot.
Yeah.
But when I got drafted down there were people at North Central that warned me about this place. I loved it. I
It was
loved it.
great.
I had a good partner, but he was an old head.
Mhm.
So we never worked 5 days a week together.
Mhm.
But he'd work and then I'd work and then he'd have Saturday, Sunday off and I'd have Tuesday, Wednesday off. So, it was tough that way, but um I just did so much more down there. I remember at North Central when I was in training, we answered a shooting and it happened in an apartment complex parking lot. And I remember kneeling over this man going, I better not screw this up because this may be the only opportunity I have to work a shooting while I'm in training.
Mhm.
And it was,
Oh
but
yeah.
I got some experience at Oak Cliff. But see, I was still on 2-man status when I went to Oak Cliff. So
Mhm.
they still had to keep somebody with me. And that's not something that just rolled off of people's heads
Yeah.
because they didn't know me. They
Yeah.
just know me as this officer that got put down there.
Mhm. Yeah, I loved it. I always thought that if I am going to be a Dallas police officer, I want to work where I'm really, really working. And obviously the citizens of North Central absolutely deserved our best service and they deserved our protection and all of that. But when I was in my early 20s, I wanted to run up and down the alleys and I wanted to catch the bad guys and I wanted to really make a difference in a community that needed somebody to help them. So I'm really glad I had that opportunity. And when I talk to other people from that time frame, that's what they say also. They don't like the fact that so many people died. They don't like the violence and the destruction in the neighborhood, but it did make them good cops. It did,
Yes, absolutely.
it did make us good cops. And I think we carried that with us. I know that you carried that street experience into your nursing career. You
Oh,
know,
absolutely.
you had seen what humans do to other humans.
Yes.
And so you were able to continue serving. So, and that's a conversation that you and I've had before about it isn't just women that change the police work, or the community and the way women were allowed to do their jobs in police work, but it's some of the men also. It took men and women both to really get us closer to where we need to be. And I think we need to
Right.
acknowledge that. We need to acknowledge the men that stood up for, hey, let's do this right, and let's be honorable and with integrity, and and shut up and let people do their job.
Yes.
And whether it's with men or women, or it's with the different races in police work, or in the United States, different religions in police work, it takes everybody to be open to change, acknowledge that it's difficult sometimes, ask questions, learn, and then get out of the way of progress. Just
Yeah.
get out of the way,
Absolutely.
you
I
know?
think the best team is a male and a female. I
Mhm.
think we approach things a little differently, but when it comes time to slap the cuffs on, we're on the same page.
Right.
But one time when I was in Oak Cliff, now I didn't have much time on, and I didn't know much about this station in this area. but we were in this crazy apartment complex. It was weird. It was only one story, but it was sprawled out everywhere. And this woman had locked herself out of her apartment, and she was causing a nuisance in the common area. And so there was like, it must have been a slow night because it was like 7 or 8 officers out there. And I went out there, and he goes, just stay in the car. I said, I'm not staying in the car. So I got out of the car and I went over and I talked to her, and I said, what's going on? How did this happen? You know, da 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 da. Process of elimination. She looked at me and she goes, well, I just walked out. I said, did you take your keys with you? She said, well, I don't know. And I said, well, let's go see if the door's open. Walked over, opened the door. I made sure she locked it when we shut it back. And all these officers were like, how'd you do that? I talked to her.
Yeah. Yeah.
And these guys were just so inconvenienced because she was locked out of her apartment. They couldn't find anybody to let her in.
That's funny. Yeah.
No, it was hilarious. And I was just like,
That's good stories. Yeah. Yeah. So you left police work and then you went into nursing. You continued to serve. And then you also have some hobbies that bring you joy and give you something to do. Could you share some of that with our listeners?
Well, one of the things I missed about policing was the adrenaline. I mean, I just, I'd go for a run just to get some adrenaline. And I was like, I got to do something else. This ain't cutting it. So I ended up taking that training I learned from the jocks and buying a motorcycle. And I got involved with a breast cancer fundraiser and ended up taking it cross country. And everybody that was supposed to ride with me backed out the night before. And so I ended up doing it alone. And I loved it. Once I got to Cheyenne, I loved it. We had Canadians coming down and we had people coming up, and we had, people coming sideways. And so we all met in Cheyenne. But yeah, I was on the road by myself. Unfortunately, we had to accommodate the Canadians, so it was July. Oh, and I came through the panhandle. I thought I was going to die. But I had a friend in Childress that said, you can crash in my spare room. And I just sat in his living room in the air conditioning for the longest time. And I said, I don't think I can move. He goes, you don't have to. Says, but we need to eat, or I need to eat. So we ended up taking care of that, getting food. And then I just sat in the AC the rest of the night. And then I got up 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, took off. But that was tough. Now, taking off at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning wasn't too terrible bad. It was still hot in Childress, but
Yeah, Childress is pretty hot in the summer. Yeah, it's pretty hot.
Yeah. And the McDonald's, I was afraid to go in the McDonald's and cool off before he got there because I didn't want to cool off and heat up, cool off and heat up. Yeah. And then he goes, yeah, jump on the bike and we'll go. And I'm just like, I can't jump on the bike. But we did, and I survived.
Excellent. So you also mentioned that you like to fly fish. That you get, yeah.
I got into that 2000, 2001. Wanting to stay in the outdoors. I love the outdoors. I love the water. I love all of that. Somehow or another, we learned to cast in some of the ponds just in Dallas. And this guy took us out there and was teaching us the different casts and everything. And next thing I knew, it was, Cindy, hey, Cindy. And I'm like, what? And they said, we're leaving. I looked up, everybody is off the shore and loaded up in the van. And I, was just so enthralled by it that I just didn't want to stop. So I jumped on.
There's something to be said about something that you can just enjoy that much, that you're able just to check out, and especially because I know you and I have talked about it before. It's not often that we can go someplace and feel safe. it's not often that we can go someplace and let our guard down because we're always waiting for that next bad thing to happen and
Right.
that we have to respond to. So the fact that you found something that is probably, and in my own words, not your words, but in my own words, is very healing for you and is very
We
calming.
continue to use it to heal. We work with veterans and we work with breast cancer survivors and anybody else, that crosses our path that we think can benefit from it. We take them fly fishing.
Excellent.
This guy that's got several ponds on his land has opened his land up to letting veterans heal by fly fishing.
Yeah.
And they feel safe there because it's private property.
Yeah.
And at night they're behind a locked gate. It's way cool.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it. There's so much that we need, but there's so much that we can do for ourselves, and there's so much we can do for others. So you had a successful career as a police officer, a successful career as a nurse. It sounds as if your retirement has been successful. You've had things that have brought you joy and excitement, and you have been able to segue in and out of those. Is there anything on the horizon? Do you have any plans? Anything that you're kind of thinking about or considering doing?
I might spend some time as a mermaid, but in order to do that, I need to get scuba certified. So if I need to, I can breathe underwater.
That would be important.
But that's the truth. Like an aquarium or like there's a scuba place here in Dallas that I'm kind of affiliated with, and they do things like they go to the children's aquarium in Fair Park, and they do fun things like on Easter they dress up like an Easter bunny, and they dive in the aquarium and play with the kids. It's hilarious, absolutely hilarious.
I can see you doing that. I can absolutely see you doing that. I mean, and let's think about it. When you were running through the streets of Oak Cliff, you did not think that you were going to be a mermaid or an Easter bunny or any of
Or a
that,
wet Easter bunny.
right? Right?
They do it down with them every year, and every year when they start thinking about it, before they can make the phone call, the aquarium calls them. Is the Easter bunny going to make a visit?
Love it.
And anybody can do it because the Easter bunny looks the same.
Yeah, love it. I love it.
It's a
So
lot
I
of fun.
have one question that I ask everybody at the end of our conversation.
Yes.
And this is a question that my husband, Todd, so he still an active SWAT officer. He's been on the department 33 years. He's probably going to
When
do
I was
another.
on, like, when I was on, we called it TAC.
Yeah, tactical. Yeah. It goes from division to unit and, section and all that stuff. So
They were across
SWAT,
the hall from
TAC.
traffic. So,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So he is still on. He'll probably retire to 2.5 years or whatever. And then I left at my 30 years and all. And as you and I know, life goes on. We have, 10, 20, 30, 40 years of living after we leave law enforcement. But how do you want to be remembered? The big question, how does Cindy want to be remembered?
I don't care if I'm remembered. I would like to encourage officers, when they're on the streets, when they're running down the alleys, when they're arresting people, when they're booking into jail, the last thing on their mind is retiring. But all those things take a toll on their health, on their mental health. And so if they go to church when they're in the academy, they need to continue to go to church when they're on the streets. No matter whether they got to stay up late or not. If they just got home, it used to be, it's getting better, but it used to be that the average police officer would retire and 2 years later would have a heart attack and die. Not as many people are dying from heart attacks, but the stats remain the same as far as, they just finally don't have all that adrenaline in it. finally don't have to, you know, grab somebody. They finally aren't eating at Denny's every night. So it's getting better, but at the same time, it's something they need to think about so they can plan for it.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And honestly, that you kind of summed up why I do what I do. And that is because we didn't work so hard to stay alive to just die. We didn't work
Right.
so hard to let our lives fall apart around us. And, we didn't work so hard taking care of everybody else and then just not take care of ourselves.
Right.
So I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. And let me tell you something, sister. You go down in that aquarium in a bunny suit, and there are going to be people that remember you.
Yes, ma'am.
But in all honesty, I guarantee that there are things that you said today that somebody needed to hear. And even though this was just an informal conversation, you really threw out some stuff for people. You went on and did something that wasn't 100% law enforcement related, but you're still serving and you're still a cop at heart and still taking care of yourself and taking care of others. And I personally want to thank you for that. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.